actually totally assumed that this anime was 12 episodes, both walking in and out of the God of High School episode 12. And that's why I was a little kind of shocked by how brutal the cliffhanger was, because there was no after the credits scene confirmation of season 2. And then I realized, oh, it's actually 13 episodes, and that was probably the biggest sigh of relief I've had all season, because I need to see where they're going with the end of this episode. Extract the key from Ilpio to then give to Shark Boy, who then becomes a demonic angel of death who says, like, you're all losers and are going to die. Where do you go with this? And if anything, I think this episode clearly indicates that we haven't seen Powerful yet, and even what we're currently witnessing probably isn't even close to being what's considered powerful in the grand scheme of the God of High School, and that's an insane thing to think about. And I don't really remember the last time I've seen an anime that's been new and really bold enough to say, hey, we're gonna just constantly up the ante, and power imbalances where you just constantly are escalating with power levels and things like that is something I'm traditionally not a huge fan of. But there is something about the God of High School's charm, and maybe it is because it's literally like boring the power of the gods, so to speak, that really just sucks me in and just has me kind of being like, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm really intrigued to see what the hell's happening, and that's kind of how I feel. I mean, they're even able to sneak in some nice backstory time outside of the main cultist group, but I mean, it's kind of interesting seeing just what led someone to be so hungry for power when you pretty much are ripped away from your mother, one who's weak as losers, and you're going to be powerful, and that's how you're going to inherit from me. And manipulation could have led someone to be a little insane, and it's starting to make a whole lot of sense that, you know, maybe we should have stuck with mommy here, because clearly grandpa was kind of an asshole. At a just standard presentation level, they're not even moving, I'm just like, that looks cool. And there was more of a thing like, oh, someone in the cast of characters is the key. It's going to be an ability that's him necessarily to win in a one-shot KO, but I thought he was going to put up a good fight, and he kind of did, and then immediately realizing that, oh god, we shouldn't even assume characters are going to win this show. We should just assume that some powerful six-member is going to transport the whole town over, because apparently missiles are coming to destroy everyone. And the fact that he actually tried to give it to Jin Mori, who then unfortunately lost it to Big Man, who before, which would actually be kind of cool because, you know, the whole idea of like the devil falling from heaven and the actual world, pretty much a super cool way to take the visuals in an interesting direction and kind of subvert what you're typically used to when you see someone say they're going to destroy the world. Starts off in the traditional demon who had a good time outside of the person trying to just destroy every loser in sight, is our man who's racked up an insane amount of debt and no money income. How many millions did this guy rack up? And just the fact that we only saw him a couple his entire career here. But honestly, if I'm hoping for any character to have a good outcome with this insane event, I hope it's him. This man has done a lot of good things in my mind, and I think he deserves a nice paycheck, and goddamn if he can cash that, what a paycheck. But honestly, with his luck so far, I wouldn't be surprised if there's no money to be paid, because everything is kind of destroyed. I think it did have a lot to prove. Like, if you're gonna say, you know, something that a lot of people started watching, like Mindzo saying, like, there's so much we don't know, but I feel like that's where Season 2 is going to come into play. And I think as long as we do get that Season 2, which I feel like it's an almost guarantee because of how popular it is, Crunchyroll's not going to let this thing go anytime soon. I think this is going to be something that is going to have a lot of lore building, world building, kind of history and things like that coming into a second season. Whereas Season 1, Episode 13, I imagine is going to end now, has been transferred around, and where do you go with this? Like, if someone has it, are they indestructible? Like, what can you actually do with it? Because you could argue, well, one person had it and he was defeated, but did he actually use the true potential of the key? It's very hard to say, but I definitely feel like we're building up to potentially Jin having the key at some point in time. I feel like that could be a very reasonable possibility, but then again, by giving the main character that key almost immediately and then almost seamlessly losing it, maybe that's actually not the direction they're going. All I can say with this episode is it was something that entertained me through and through. I think the issues that people have with the series are warranted to a degree, because it does kind of draw you in thinking it's going to be, you know, a big fighting martial arts tournament, and then it turns into a supernatural cluster mess. Like, it's just insanity as far as the eye can see, and if you don't like that insanity, it's going to make you really not like this series. For me, the more insane the better. I just like seeing things and I'm like, well, I can't see this in live action, so seeing basically gods toss around the world, I think is pretty cool, especially considering when you got one badass dude holding up basically God from destroying the world. I'm just like, that's cool to me. And honestly, I'm kind of just invested in that alone. Some people may say, oh, that's just for eye candy or mindless entertainment, but there is stuff happening here. There's a lot of gears turning. It's just that this series is obviously going to explore that more in future episodes, which, yes, we may only have one episode left to go in season 1, but it doesn't feel like in any way that this is something that's just going to be a one and done season. Even if there's a lot of source material readers unhappy in the West with this, it's something that is popular and is making money. I don't see why we wouldn't get another season, and to me it feels like maybe the reason the pacing could have been off is to get to some of these events so in a season 2 they can take it a bit more slow now that you're more accustomed to what's happening in this world. That's just my assumption. To me, it definitely does feel like the pacing has been iffy off and on throughout this show. Not as bad as a lot of people said for me, because I've enjoyed it from episode 1 all the way up until now, but it definitely, you can tell they sped up to get to certain moments such as this, because clearly that's where the story definitely changes and probably everything we thought we knew about it is tossed out the window in favor of whatever we're seeing right now. I can't really dissect a lot of the story elements that we saw in this episode because literally, yes, it was one big action spectacle, but we don't know about all these individual elements yet, so we have to wait and see with hopefully next week, and then obviously season 2 whenever we do get it. To me, this was a fun, action-packed, brutally insane episode, and I'm glad we have an episode 13, because if I had to wait for a season 2 confirmation and this was the last episode, I think I'd be a little insane right now. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? And where do you think it might go next week? Of course, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like to show your support and hit that subscribe button if you happen new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.